Have you ever heard of a thing called fluoridation? Fluoridation of water?
President Trump and I are going to stop the mass poisoning of American children.
Fluoridation is the most monstrously conceived and dangerous communist plot we have ever had to face.
I think fluoride is a poison.
Have you ever seen a commie drink a glass of water?
And it causes cancers. Of course, it causes your bones to deteriorate.
Vodka. That's what they drink, isn't it? Never water.
I think fluoride is on the way out because of that court decision. I think the faster that it goes out, the better.
It's a toxic it's a toxic byproduct of certain chemical process and oil industry process. And for many years, those industries, it was costing them thousands of dollars per drum to get rid of them. And then they came up with the idea, why don't we put it in the water supply?
Fluoride. Yeah. Preventing gum disease and tooth decay. That's what it's good for, and why it's in water. And, sorry, I'm getting a note here from my editors. And that's why it has to be banned. Fuck gums! What have gums ever done to us? Why do I need a little strip of meat in between my teeth, making them all pink and stuff? Which obviously means gums are for girls. Real men, real manly men, let their teeth decay and let their gums rot, because that's what nature intended. That's right, we're taking fluoride out of the water, thanks to the intervention of the healthiest man alive, and now the man in charge of public health in the United States of America, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And before you ask, yes, the F stands for fucking.
USAID and the Alliance for Progress that put America on the side of the poor, not just in this country, but all around the world.
But we're not going to leave Americans high and dry. Oh no, we know better than that. Your teeth, gonna get a little decayed. Your gums, gonna get a little disease, but that's for your own good. In fact, we're gonna make you healthier than ever, because we are, at the advice of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., replacing the fluoride in your water with the only thing that can make you even slightly as healthy and reasonable and smart as our Lord and Saviour RFK Jr. That's right. We are replacing your fluoride with worms. Cheer for worms. Soon, every gum will have a disease, and every brain will have a worm. And once every brain has been eaten by worms, we will finally have made America healthy again. That is the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. guarantee. After all, the F doesn't stand for fluoride.
A cool drink, refreshing whether it's in Edmonton or in Calgary, but the difference is what's in the water. Calgary's supply is fluoride-free, and new research suggests that it's led to an increase in tooth decay.
Hi there. Do you like your teeth not being black and rotten? Do you prefer your gums healthy and free of preventable diseases? Are you hesitant to accept our Lord and Saviour, the humble brainworm, into your heart, from which will eat its way up to your brain before eating also your brain? Well, if you are, stick around, because I, Brigitte Empire, science and culture correspondent for pro-fluoride newspaper lobbyists, the Daily Telegraph, am here to set the facts straight about why fluoride is good actually, and why Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is wrong to want it banned in the United States. In fact, if he does force a nationwide ban, as he has hinted he will, it will result in a massive public health emergency within a few years, although, given he's anti-vaccine and pro-raw milk, you probably won't notice that massive health emergency because of, all the other massive public health emergencies he'll have caused. Everyone say, welcome back, measles!
When they first started saying, trust the experts, I was saying, where do they get that from?
But why am I here to help, you might ask? Do I not work for the British press, naturally an enemy of teeth everywhere, and a hive of scum and villainy to boot? Well, I am British, so naturally, if I were truly as patriotic as my editors would like, I would be advocating for every country's teeth to be as yellow, crooked, and rotten as our proud populace. The thing is, I'm also a biology PhD graduate, so I just can't stand by and watch as the good name of science gets stamped on by someone with the skin texture of beef jerky who wants to set the public health dial in the USA back to the era of polio epidemics, typhoid, and dying of dysentery. But this goes beyond RFK Jr. practically being the senator for the Oregon Trail, because I'm here primarily to save my editor Dan. Think about Dan. Teeth are all that he has left. Please, don't take them away from him. What'll he be then? Just a soup. And this isn't some new technology I brought around to save my editor, god no. He's been around for thousands of years, and so has fluoride, actually. Fluoride is actually a naturally occurring mineral in many water sources. Even in terms of its implementation by governments as something we actively add to water supplies, it's been around since the mid-1940s, and clearly people like RFK Jr. don't think that timing is a coincidence. Died 1945, born 1945, close enough? Welcome back into our water supplies, Adolf Hitler!
Do you realize that fluoridation is the most monstrously conceived and dangerous communist plot we have ever had to face?
Unlike Hitler, however, fluoride is one of the most abundant elements found in nature. People don't think about it much because, to be honest, most people didn't pay enough attention in chemistry class. I, however, was the opposite. I paid too much attention. An equal and opposite problem. So I know that fluoride is the ionic form of fluorine. It's like fluorine, with a cute little negative charge. And although, again, people don't tend to remember your elements other than oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen, fluorine is actually the 13th most abundant element in the Earth's crust, so it's pretty much everywhere. In fact, if you don't have fluoride in your water, you probably get it through your toothpaste, or in some places, even in your table salt, because fluoride is very important for dental hygiene, and not getting horrible tooth decay. RFK Jr. doesn't care about this though, because he only listens to the worm. And since fluoride is not spice, it must not flow. We want desert power, goddammit, not dental power.
I think fluoride is a poison. My son was saying this. My son was in the hazardous waste industry, and he had to take an exam. And that if a fluoride truck crashes on the highway, they have to clear the highway for miles around. And people come in Tyvek suits and respirators and gloves to do the cleanup. And it's a toxic it's a toxic byproduct of certain chemical process and oil industry process. And for many years, those industries, it was costing them thousands of dollars per drum to get rid of them. And then they came up with the idea, why don't we put it in the water supply? And they did that, and it causes cancers. Of course, it causes your bones to deteriorate, and it causes severe IQ loss. And last week, a group that I'm associated with won a 7-year lawsuit against EPA on fluoride that I think will result in the fluoride being removed from all the water supplies in this country.
I do think the common occurrence of fluoride in salt water, as well as groundwater and freshwater streams, is important to point out though, since a lot of the horror stories around fluoride stem from bad arguments about it being a scary chemical that's just not natural, when 1, everything is made of chemicals, water is in fact a chemical, 2, it is natural, in that it occurs in nature and is present in water in nature, though at different quantities in different places. And 3, something being natural doesn't make it good anyway. Arsenic is natural, but I wouldn't be advocating for draining rat poison into our water supply. What makes something good or bad for us isn't the degree to which we would come across it in nature, but whether it has positive health outcomes for us as a society, supported by strong scientific evidence. And water fluoridation, well, it fits that to a T. As well as, in fact, being something you might also find in nature, which, as I've already established, doesn't matter unless you're trying to do some sort of paleo diet bullshit but for water, in which case, drink from your local stream and enjoy ingesting intestinal parasites like your ancestors intended and getting heavy metal poisoning from the local mine runoff. If you don't get enough worms, maybe you'll finally become like your hero RFK Jr, or at least become like 1 to 2% more Kwisatz Haderach. But do not listen to this failson al-Gaib, please. If my testimony about the quality of the science isn't enough for you, I'll back it up with papers, which I'll throw at the screen now like Gambit from the X-Men, but for nerds. And if that too is not enough for you, well then let me tell you a story by way of the National Institute of Health, written in the halcyon days before, presumably, Elon Musk sentenced 5 teenagers with names like Big Balls to burn the institute to the ground. God bless America. Picture the scene. The year is 1901. A fresh-faced dental school graduate by the name of Frederick McKay moves across the country to open up a dental practice in Colorado Springs. Now, the stereotype these days is that it's us Brits that have horrible teeth. But in a time before grills and veneers, we weren't so different. Upon arrival in Colorado Springs, McKay found that many of the locals had, and I quote, "grotesque brown stains on their teeth," according to the NIH. So severe could these permanent stains be, in fact, sometimes entire teeth were splotched the colour of chocolate candy. Despite this being a common phenomenon in McKay's new digs, he struggled to find any mention of this malady in the literature, much less how to treat it. And when the locals were quizzed as to what could possibly be the cause of their tea-coloured teeth, they blamed everything from the quality of their milk, to their pork-rich diet, to the calcium-enriched water they drank. Not satisfied with any of these answers, for reasons, McKay spent the next 3 decades trying to solve the mystery of what came to be known as Colorado brown stain. Incredible drag name. I mean, it's not the catchiest name for a disease I've ever heard. But then again, this is the country whose fascist dictator's name literally means fart in British English, so I probably set my expectations too high. Just someone take it as a drag king name. Plus, a Colorado Springs dental study found at the time that almost 90% of the city's locally born children had brown stains, so it's not a fitting name. McKay gained a collaborator in the form of Dr. G.V. Black in 1909, with whom he worked on the phenomenon we now know as fluorosis for 6 years, until his death in 1915. Upon arrival in Colorado Springs, he found himself shocked by how prevalent these brown stains were. In Dr. Black's own words, "I spent considerable time walking on the streets, noticing the children in their play, attracting their attention and talking with them about their games, etc., for the purpose of studying the general effect of the deformity. I found it prominent in every group of children. One does not have to search for it is continually forcing itself on the attention of the stranger by its persistent prominence. This is much more than a deformity of childhood. If it were only that, it would be of less consequence. It is a deformity for life." The two of them made great strides in understanding the mechanics of this browning of the teeth, how it emerged and developed in children, and bizarrely how teeth afflicted by the Colorado brown stain were surprisingly and inexplicably resistant to decay. Eventually, McKay was convinced to test one of the popular theories among the locals, one that we mentioned earlier, the concentration of minerals in the water. In 1923, McKay met with parents of children with Colorado brown stain, not in Colorado Springs, but in Oakley, Idaho. Brown stains that only appeared after the construction of a communal water pipeline to a spring 5 miles out of town. Despite finding nothing unusual in the water, he advised the town to abandon the pipeline and to switch to another spring as the source. Within a few years, the town would be free of any browning on their children's teeth. Something, as they say, was in the water. And that thing was fluoride. You see, with high levels of fluoride, the teeth can experience browning, but in return, they become resistant to tooth decay. Now that's a trade-off that most people wouldn't take, but with some scientific tinkering and comparisons of different fluoride levels in drinking water, it was discovered that fluoride levels of up to 1 part per million in drinking water did not cause browning, but would still provide the additional resistance to decay provided in the browning cases. And in areas where dental care is scarce, expensive or hard to get, that protection could potentially save people a lot of pain, especially children. This was put to the test in 1945, when Grand Rapids, Michigan became the first city in the world to fluoridate its drinking water. After 15 years of fluoridation, researchers found that rates of tooth decay had dropped by 60%. A massive breakthrough and nothing short of a revolution in dental hygiene.
I think fluoride is a poison.
And it's not like this is something that we thought worked in the past and has since been proven false. Even governments full of cranks, such as the Boris Johnson Conservative government in the UK, published a report showing the benefits of fluoridation for reducing tooth decay. Their report, despite being published under the regime that brought you bang a bob to make big bang bong for Brexit.
The bongs cost £500,000 because
they're very costly bongs.
But we're working up a plan so that people can bung a bob for a big bang bong because there are some people who want to
bung.
I haven't quite worked out.
Found areas in England with higher fluoride concentrations were 63% less likely to be admitted to hospital for tooth extractions due to decay, with a greater effect in deprived areas where access to dentistry is harder, often due to the cost. And in a time of increasing austerity and increasing cost of dental care and cost of living in general, this is very important. So why would anyone want to abandon a technology that essentially wiped out tooth decay for 2/3 of the population? Well, I'm glad you asked, because we can't talk about fluoride without talking about the cranks that want it gone. And they want it gone, for the most part, for the simple reason that people fear what they do not understand. Or, as the case of many of the pet projects of the far right, they fear what they don't understand is a secret communist plot.
Do you realize that fluoridation is the most monstrously conceived and dangerous communist plot we have ever had to face?
That's right. The bourgeoisie will fall on their knees at the sight of the gorgeous pearly whites of the proletariat. Thousands of workers, not a single case of tooth decay, while their means of production are just a perfect smile away. Dentists of the world, unite! You have nothing to lose but your cavities!
And got an autism diagnosis, and the vaccine court had awarded her $20 million for acknowledging that the child had gotten autism from the vaccine. And she didn't want it to happen to other kids, and so I sat down with this pile of studies. And I'm used to reading science. I'm very comfortable reading it. I wanted to be a scientist when I was a little kid. And my life, my legal career has been about science. It's, virtually all the cases that I've been involved with, hundreds and hundreds of cases, almost all of them involve some scientific controversy. And so I'm comfortable with reading science, and I know how to read it critically. I know how to look for the flaws in it, and how to weigh the weight to various studies.
During the Red Scare in the United States during the late 1940s and 1950s, and to a lesser extent in the 1960s, activists on the far right of American politics routinely asserted that fluoridation was part of a far-reaching plot to impose a socialist or communist regime.
Have you ever seen a commie drink a glass of water?
These conspiracy theorists were the bread and butter of everyone from your weird American libertarians to the John Birch Society, a far-right political group that is, at its core, a weird reactionary Red Scare club that insists the only way to stave off the spectre of communism is to move America and further towards the far right, until it presumably falls off the edge of the world. But you shouldn't need me to introduce you to their politics, because most of you are currently living in it. From 2016, the John Birch Society, as The Atlantic put it, saw many of its core instincts finally reflected in the White House. Although fluoride scaremongering isn't uniquely a right-wing project, many Green parties, such as those in the UK and New Zealand, have historically dabbled in anti-fluoride campaigns, mostly falling prey to the appeal to nature fallacy that draws your garden variety crystal mum and stoner hippies into green movements, or did. Before the pandemic came, everyone was trapped on social media, and then everyone within 5 meters of a healing crystal or a yoga mat swung wildly towards the far right. The Green Movement's fear of fluoride is much less aligned with the Red Scare ideology of the right, however, whose messages consistently focus on fear-mongering, searching any government program for Reds under the bed. Even when the US government rolling out fluoridation programs was the same when using stay-behind armies in Europe and fascist paramilitaries in South America and East Asia to put millions of Reds in the ground. The history of the American right is 100 groups of the most paranoid men on earth, all accusing each other of being communists. Which is absurd because anyone who's ever met a real leftist will tell you that every communist they've met is actually a liberal, and the only true communist is you, the girl reading this.
On no account will a commie ever drink water, and not without good reason.
Two of these Red Scare crackpots, however, had these extremely normal things to say about the power of fluoride to convert all poor, unassuming Americans into card-carrying Bolsheviks. Dr. Charles Bett, a prominent anti-fluoridationist, charged that fluoridation was better than using the atom bomb, because the atom bomb has to be made and transported to the place it has to be set off, while poisonous fluorine has been placed right beside the water supplies, which we consume as a daily necessity. In 1987, E. Stevens claimed that he was told by Charles Eliot Perkins that repeated doses of infinitesimally small amounts of fluoride will, in time, reduce an individual's brain power to resist domination by slowly poisoning and narcotizing a certain area of the brain, and will thus make him submissive to the will of those who wish to govern him. The more I read of these far-right conspiracy nuts, the more their fear of toothpaste making them submissive seems like a sex thing. E. Stevens, Dr. Charles Bett, I think I could solve many of your problems by introducing you to a few people. Have you two ever heard of pegging? Despite people like RFK Jr. trying to make it seem like their scare stories about fluoride are a new and revolutionary way to think about public health, anti-fluoride nutjobs like the ones I just quoted have been at this shit since the 1960s, a decade after the US launched its National Fluoridation Program, which has, since its inception, prevented thousands of cases of tooth decay, particularly in deprived areas. But it's hard to make people understand when a preventative measure is working, since, by its very nature, you're not seeing anything drastic happen. Anti-vaccine sentiment works the same way, and is another favourite topic of RFK Jr., popping up in places where massive vaccination efforts have wiped out many deadly diseases. But with these diseases no longer a threat, people start asking why they're getting vaccinated at all, not realising that the reason the diseases aren't going around is because they're getting vaccinated. RFK Jr. himself was responsible for an outbreak of measles in Samoa due to this very attitude, And there's currently an outbreak of measles in the US in areas with high rates of anti-vaccination sentiment in the local population, which he is also partially responsible for as a massive public figure. As with vaccines, the claims made against fluoridation vary, with the only common denominator being that they are all, in a word, bollocks.
I think fluoride is a poison.
For one example, one of the most recent claims that made a big splash was that fluoridated water reduces IQ in children, a conspiracy theory that made its way to the federal court in California last September, which ruled against the Environmental Protection Agency to order action over concerns about potential health risks from currently recommended levels of fluoride in the American drinking water supply. The district court judge that made this ruling, Edward Chen, said this about the decision. "In all, there is substantially and scientifically credible evidence establishing that fluoride poses a risk to human health. It is associated with a reduction in the IQ of children, and is hazardous at doses that are far too close to fluoride levels in the drinking water of the United States." The evidence the judge is referring to is a study by the National Institute of Health. But if you look at the study, you'll find that reductions in IQ were not found in children receiving the levels of fluoride you find in drinking water. In fact, they were receiving a much higher dose of fluoride, and thus the court ruling makes no sense at all. In fact, even the NIH's writings on its study's findings note that the study was not designed to evaluate the health effects of fluoridated drinking water alone, and that there was insufficient data to determine if the flow fluoride level 0.7 mg per litre currently recommended for US community water supplies has a negative effect on children's IQ. In fact, the lowered IQ effects were only found at 1.5 mg of fluoride per litre, more than double the amount that people actually get in their water. But the thing is, people don't look this stuff up. So now we have everyone from people casually reading the newspaper, to district fucking judges, to the future head of the Department of Health, the now head of the Department of Health at the time of filming, insisting that drinking fluoridated water makes you stupid. When even in the studies they cite to make these claims, if you actually read the sources they point to, it says the exact opposite.
RFK Jr.'s views on science and medicine have been controversial at best and often scientifically wrong. He's touted debunked studies that connect vaccines to autism, disproven by much research, with the CDC clearly stating there's no connection between the two.
Fluoride is on the way out because of that court decision. I think the faster that it goes out, the better.
The court decision he's referring to is from September, when a federal judge ordered the EPA to further regulate fluoride in drinking water. The determination stemming from a U.S. government report from the National Toxicology Program, concluding that fluoride at 1.5 milligrams per liter, twice the recommended amount in U.S. drinking water, is linked to lower IQ levels in children. But no studies evaluating IQ were conducted in the United States. It was based primarily on data from non-U.S. countries, including Canada, China, and Mexico, getting higher levels of fluoride.
Anti-fluoridation claims are pretty much all like this. Point to a study saying fluoridation is toxic, but the study says it's toxic at much higher doses than anyone actually receives. The simple truth is that everything is bad for you if you have too much of it. That's why you don't have too much of it. That's why there is a legally designated safe limit for fluoride in drinking water. Pasta is good for me too, but if I had too much pasta, I'd get heart failure. That's why doctors keep telling me to only have one bowl instead of 35. But if I don't have them all, how am I going to try my delicious pasta sauce with every conceivable shape? How will I know whether it's better with fusilli, spaghetti, or macaroni? Science compels me to eat. And if I get a heart attack, well, I'll make it everyone else's problem, like RFK Jr. plans to do with fluoride, and demand pasta be banned, for the sake of the public good.
Better make sure the vaccine itself is not killing anybody.
And it's not like these claims are even new. People have been trying to prove a link between fluoridated water and low IQ for decades. Each time, they get the same result, and yet they keep trying, and every time, someone misinterprets what these studies say. Doesn't notice that the fluoride levels they are testing for are far too high to draw any reasonable conclusion about the effect the fluoride in the actual drinking water supply might have, and becomes a fluoride truther based on naught but their own lack of reading comprehension. As Snopes put it, the claim that studies have linked fluoride to reduced intelligence is a textbook-ready case of bait and switch. In Macaulay's and many others' language, the topic has surreptitiously been shifted from the act of water fluoridation as a public health measure to the broader concept of fluoride toxicity in children. Many otherwise benign chemicals can also be harmful in high concentrations. Thiocyanate, a chemical found in kale, may kill you at high doses, for example. The most famous and commonly cited study, partially because the anti-fluoridation group Fluoride Action Now issued a misleading press release about it that was incorrectly covered as a Reuters report by a number of newspapers used to link fluoride to reduced IQ, was published by a team of Harvard researchers. This paper, a meta-analysis of previously conducted studies that compared populations of children exposed to various levels of naturally occurring fluoride in their water, concluded, findings from our meta-analysis of 27 studies published over 22 years suggest an inverse association between high fluoride exposure and children's intelligence. Children who lived in areas with high fluoride exposure had lower IQ scores than those who lived in low exposure or control areas. Most of these studies' high fluoride groups used concentrations many times higher than allowable limits in the United States, and many of the control groups or low fluoride groups had concentrations in the range that is actually targeted as optimal by water fluoridation regulations. And this is the key to every misunderstanding about fluoride. The evidence against fluoride in the water being safe doesn't actually say it's not safe. The levels that aren't safe aren't found in drinking water. Believe it or not, public health officials don't want to murder your children by flooding their water with evil chemicals. But the fluoride deniers only use science when they feel like it will be useful in their arguments. They don't actually care about whether the studies they are citing say what they say they do. If you correctly point out that they do not agree with the anti-fluoride stance being pushed, the anti-fluoride gang, or as no one has ever called them before, fluoriders, think about it, we'll catch on, will often switch to a different argument. An appeal to nature argument against putting anything that's not supposed to be in water, as if they are hydrologists who are well read on the makeup of most of our water sources, instead of just paranoid weirdos who are so ready to be jump scared by scary chemicals at any given moment that they have recurring nightmares about being murdered by the periodic table. For those of us who actually care about the facts though, it's important to remember that the science says that fluoridated water is safe. And not just that, it's massively beneficial, especially for ensuring a healthy tooth development in children. So, getting back to the exhaustive argument against the one badly understood meta-analysis out of Harvard that gives everyone with a fear of toothpaste an aneurysm, currently the EPA's maximum allowable limit for fluoride in drinking water is 4 mg per litre, with voluntary recommendation of 2 mg per litre. When fluoride is added to a public water supply, the target concentration is 0.7 mg per litre. Supporters of the notion that this Harvard paper's collection of studies still suggest developmental risks of fluoridation at levels used in public health programs might argue that 8 of the studies analysed in the meta-review focus on concentrations allegedly within this allowable range. This is a factual point that deserves further investigation, as a close look at these 8 studies reveals that their contribution to the fluoridation debate is dubious at best. Of those 8 studies, half of them co-investigated fluoride and iodine together, making it hard or in some cases impossible to separate out the combined effects, and 2 of these 4 studies reach conclusions that are counter to the hypothesis that fluoridation levels alone are the main driver of a lower IQ. Among the 8 studies, 2 of them do not appear to equally measure the water intake of the regions in which they are observing differences in intelligence quotient, or at the very least they do not report the total range of values for each region, or any statistical information regarding those values. 2 of those 8 studies use a control group with fluoride values that are literally the same or higher than the target range of fluoridation efforts in the United States, seemingly ceding the point that those levels do not affect children's IQ. Finally, 4 of these 8 papers are either published or republished in the allegedly peer-reviewed journal Fluoride, a publication of the International Society for Fluoride Research Inc., an anti-fluoridation group whose editor-in-chief is a psychiatrist in private practice with no academic background on the topic of fluoride toxicity. Collectively, this demonstrates that most of the IQ variants presented in the Harvard study to extremely high levels of fluoride that would already be considered dangerous in the US, and those studies finding effects on a smaller scale are not sufficient to demonstrate the effects those groups opposed to fluoridation claim that they demonstrate. The next issue is context. Literally none of the studies involved tested populations of individuals exposed to drinking water that was artificially supplemented with fluoride as a public health measure. Instead, all of the studies come from China or Iran, both of which have areas of naturally occurring, endemic, high fluoride pockets of groundwater. So, the science says that fluoride in the water, at the levels that it's currently administered, is fine, and in fact good. And even the studies people like RFK Jr. point to try and make it look like fluoride in the water is dangerous, draw conclusions completely counter to the people using them to make bogus pseudoscientific claims. Fluoride in the water, in areas where there isn't enough naturally occurring, helps prevent tooth decay. And that's a wonder for public health. But it's the government doing a thing, so it must be bad.
The government totally sucks. Call me motherfucker. The government totally sucks. Government.
Or so says the man who's literally about to be one of the most important figures in government, at least as far as healthcare decisions are made. So I must ask the question, is it still bad, RFK, when the government takes measures to improve public health, when the government in question is you? I suspect that your answer is no. But I wouldn't expect any logistical consistency from someone whose brain is so full of worms they might as well be the fucking God Emperor of Dune. The thing is, though, RFK Jr. will never be swayed by evidence. And neither will many of the people who believe what he has to say about fluoride. If he believed in the worth of scientific evidence, he wouldn't be anti-vaccine, for instance. RFK Jr. and people with similarly pseudoscientific attitudes to public health do not trust scientists or doctors or public health officials, just at the base level. They don't trust efforts for the public good at all, and are naturally suspicious of any effort which results in preventative measures becoming successful, because you can't see a lack of tooth decay, you can only see tooth decay. And people like RFK Jr. are like babies. Not that they're cute, because they're not, but because, in terms of public health, they lack object permanence. The moment polio is eradicated because of vaccines, they act like it never existed. That the polio vaccines were some sort of sinister plot by Big Pharma to prevent you from experiencing the joy of viral paralysis. They can't picture the world where tooth decay was so common that every small town in America looked like, well, the way Americans picture small towns in Britain. So the thing that prevents that must not be real. This is science as a game of peekaboo. If you put a blindfold on RFK Jr., I'd bet 20 quid that he thinks the world has disappeared and that he's transcended to whatever spiritual plane worms go to when they die. But whether he accepts it or not, fluoridated water has prevented a lot of unnecessary harm, especially to children. In fact, let me tell you another story. One of a place that gave in to the anti-fluoride hysteria, something RFK Jr. would love to happen all across the United States of America. Except this place is looking to bring the fluoride back.
So then what happened once fluoride was taken out of the water in 2011? What did you see?
Even though Calgary parents reported doing more of everything they could, brushing, flossing, reducing simple sugars, going to the dentist, but nevertheless, their children had worse outcomes. General anesthesia increase almost doubled in Calgary as compared to children in Edmonton. And what this means is that children under 6 who are too young to cooperate with the dentist needed dental decay treatment at almost double the rate of children in Edmonton. That was a dramatic increase in the need for intravenous antibiotic therapy to prevent overwhelming infection from an infection that originated in the tooth but went to the eye or went down to the throat. And these are life-threatening conditions if they're not treated. And that increase of 700% between 2011 and 2018 was also dramatic.
In 2011, in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, the City Council voted to remove fluoride from its water supply. According to then Council member Giancarlo Cara, the decision was both a reaction to public pressure and a way to save the council money. According to an interview Cara gave to NPR last year, "We were informed by our water services department that our fluoride injection system was kaput. We were looking at $20 million to re-up it and, about $1 million a year in operating costs. And so there was an instant conversation about, well, here's a place where we can react to the public and save money, and prove the government's listening, and we made a decision." As with many government services that are cut to save a bit of money rather than for any actual justified reason, this was a decision the city would come to regret. Over 10 years later, the effects of this decision are undeniable. Tooth decay is back. In a big way. In a study published in the Canadian Journal of Public Health, dental health outcomes for children from Calgary and Edmonton were directly compared. Edmonton's water is still fluoridated, and despite public outcry and urgings from the scientific community, Calgary's is still doing without. The study found a significant association between areas without fluoride in the water and increased rates of tooth decay related events, specifically looking at those that ended up requiring general anesthesia. Out of 2,659 children being treated for tooth decay related treatments under general anesthesia, 65 came from non-fluoridated areas, with the effect particularly pronounced in children between the ages of 0 and 5. In 2021, in response to this crisis, Calgary's residents voted 61% in favour of reintroducing fluoride to the city's water supply. But due to costs and delays, it still hasn't been completed. According to Councilman Giancarlo Cara, it's due to be completed in the first quarter of 2025, so any day now. In the intervening 14 years, however, the effects on public health have been, well, not great, especially for those from impoverished backgrounds. According to Dr. James Dickinson speaking to Global News, "There's a whole group of children growing up without fluoride, and it's going to show in their teeth," Dickinson said. "It's about looking after everybody in society. It's all very well to say, no, we can do this individually, but it's much easier and much better to do it as a society, as a whole. It's a matter of looking after one another, Dickinson said. We have a whole series of people who can't afford toothbrushes. It's really an easy thing to do, Dickinson said. Only a very tiny amount of fluoride and it makes all the difference to a lot of people. But what do they know, eh? They're just doctors and scientists doing the work to compare populations over long periods of time. Everyone knows the real experts on what's good for public health, and the only people that should ever be let near the good old patriotic American tooth are the pictures of health that will be the Trump administration's health experts, under the most healthy man in America, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because, remember, the F doesn't stand for fluoride. It stands for fucking.
Of course, it causes your bones to deteriorate.
Speaking of fucking, I would really like it if people like RFK Jr. stopped fucking with public health measures. Go eat a bear cub carcass or whatever it is you do when you're not trying to witness the golden path. Leave the public health advocacy to the people who actually know what the hell they're talking about. Let's see who else we have in the Trump administration. The hillbilly elegy guy? Elon Musk? The angels are being released right now, woman? Okay, yeah. You had a good run, America. I'm sorry you had to go out like this, but I suppose I'll just sit here and await the Chinese century. Their groundwater actually has high naturally occurring levels of fluoride in, like the amount that people like RFK Jr. will be shitting themselves over. So they'd probably be happy to hand some of those sweet, sweet halogens over. Let's end those tariffs and let President Xi make America's teeth healthy again. Is that really the joke I'm ending this on? Alright, I guess I could... Hey, thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you liked it, like, comment, subscribe, share with friends, sign up to Patreon, Coffee, PayPal, links below. For me, give money to me so I am alive and don't die and less poor than I currently am, which is poor. Do that and you get stuff. Discord, community, nice. Code, Nintendo Switch, if you like. Red name, outer end, and exclusive content. But name, like these. Lee Wilkins, George Geddes, Kira B, No Sparkling Heart, Corey, Matt J, Mighty than the Sword, Carolyn, Imogen Q, Luciana Frias Andrade, Adam, Harry, Endon191, Cav, Quesadilla de Tortilla Azul, Liron, Adam Lees, Daniel Nevels, no, not that Paul, MB, Madeline Aguirre, Ben Murphy, Lex Phoenix, Endel Kurzitz, Mira D, Jade Senior, Boa Ear, James W. Marv, and Foreign Gill, Bob the Builder, 5445554, Deborah Boone, Vegas, Zillows Athenium, Vince Whitaker, Amelia Lisette, Jason Haig, Frank McManus, Susan Foster, Helena Real, Sierra Whiskey, Orestria, Ali Catkill, John N, Lloyd Luciente, Jason Cribbett, Shield Vaden, Robin Podolsky, Turtle Chum, Casual Observer, Manta Ray, Courtney Burback, Sleepy Slug, Philip Hutzebrogger, Soma Pick, LeBrain Douche, Artie Wolf, Greg Noble, Deanna McMillan, Caroline Regalado, Alexandra Lilly, Howard Lott, Nera Nia, Scarjan, and Joey Cobalt. You should brush your teeth. Not you, patrons, but everyone. RFK Jr. maybe especially, but I guess that's not going to get the worm out, so you might as well just let it happen. My tapeworm tells me what to do. Whoa. The tapeworm tells me where to go. Pull the tapeworm out of your ass. Pull the tapeworm out of your ass. Pull the tapeworm out of your ass. Pull the tapeworm out of me.